There we go. I'll stop my share so we can see your face. How are you doing, Ash?
Oh, I'm good, thank you, Kevin. How are you?
I am well. I'm glad to have BrizJS back up and going in front of everyone's faces tonight. Yeah, look, I'm keen to hear about JavaScripting in the terminal. I know I've done a couple of utility style things, but I'm always keen to pick up some new tricks from you. So please take it away,
Cool.
my friend.
Hopefully you haven't too oversold it.
No, look, this stuff can be really handy in a pinch, and especially if you're creating, back-end services and things like that as well. So yeah, no, there's definitely lots to learn here as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name's Ashley Davis, and tonight I'm going to be giving you a live demonstration of working with data from the terminal using a toolkit that I created called DataKit, and that I'm still using it quite regularly as well. It's proving very useful. So I'm very happy I put in the effort to kind of make like an actual toolkit out of it, which can be, quite a daunting job. And Kevin, I'm looking forward to getting back together face to face as well. But tonight I'm also kind of grateful that, I didn't really have to go out on such a cold winter's night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we get started, I'm just going to give a little bit of background on, how I got to this spot and where I created DataKit to help me do my data transformations. I started a new job a few months back for a startup called Deployable, and I needed to get into the database and just ask and answer questions like about the data that we have, like really fundamental stuff that I just didn't know because I was new. And also, we're a startup running lean, so there isn't really anyone else to ask the question to. You kind of have to actually look at the data and figure out what's there. And the kind of questions I was asking is just really basic stuff like how many users do we have? And who is paying for the product versus who is using the free version? And, what features of our product are people actually using, versus the ones that are just sitting there that people don't care about? So I had these sort of questions, and I went about writing some custom code to pull data from the database. And then, I was using node.js and JavaScript, and doing data transformations, filtering the data, merging different tables together, stuff like that to get the information that I needed. And that process, which honestly I seem to kind of do for every company, like every time I start a company and I'm asking these questions, I'm like writing custom code to do it. And so I've done that for a long time, like working with data, writing code to do that. That's cool. But it sort of inspired me as well as like, isn't there a better way to do this from the command line? And I did investigate using JQ, which I'll talk about a little bit later if you've heard of that. And it didn't really do it for me. And so I just had this kind of epiphany of what it would look like, my toolkit. And so I already had the name DataKit. It used to be just like a JavaScript API. And I started adding the kinds of commands into that I needed. And I just didn't stop. I just over the last few months, I've just added a ton of commands. There's some more commands I still want to add, but I've got a really good demo to show tonight, and it's really, really useful actually. So how am I going to play this tonight? I'm going to start by jumping straight into a really basic demonstration, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you the GitHub page for it, and I'll show you how to install it and talk to you about some of the other commands that are there. And then I'm going to do a much more complex demonstration. So that might be a little bit hard to follow, but I just want to show you where you can go, like the power of this toolkit and how it can be kind of chained together, pipeline on the command line to go through, multiple data transformation steps and to get the end result that you want. So let me just get set up. I'm just going to start my timer too, just to make sure I don't go too far over time. So I'm just starting off at the terminal here. I'm on Windows 11 using Windows Terminal, but this also works on Linux and Mac OS. I'm just trying to get the Zoom controls out of my way. There we go. So this should work for you on any operating system, the exact same kind of thing that I'm doing. I'm actually in the DataKit repo, and all the data that I'm using, I've got a bunch of example data here, a bunch of JSON files, users, sales, products. You can kind of guess hopefully what's in those. And I've got some more interesting data to show you a bit later as well. That's all in the repo. So if you clone the GitHub repo, which I'll show you on GitHub a bit later, you can get this data yourself and you can have a bit of a play with it. let's have a look at what's in users.json. So let's just print that out. So there's a bunch of JSON data here for users. These aren't real users, of course. I'm not giving away any proprietary information or, secret customer lists or anything like that. I actually generated this data using ChatGPT, which is like an interesting story all on its own. I got it to generate 20 kind of randomized users, and I got it to generate some information on products that we might be selling, and also how many of those products we're selling and to which users, that kind of thing. So just like a basic data set that might be something that comes from your database. You kind of have to imagine that this is where it's coming from, our company's database. And we might want to do some data transformations on this data and then present it to like our sales department or our marketing department or something like that, so that they've got the information they need to do the kind of, I don't know, special offers and stuff that they want to do. So the first thing you might want to know with this data is how much of it there is. How many users do we have? And there's a really simple command for that with DataKit, and it's called length. So I'm printing users.json here using the cat command, and I'm using this symbol here to pipe it into the length command. Pretty simple so far. There's 20 users. Now, what you have to try and imagine here is it's not just, trivial kind of, data that I've generated for this presentation. You could have hundreds or maybe thousands of, records in your data set here that you've downloaded to a JSON file from whatever database you're using, so that you can kind of play with that data and transform it and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so one really simple thing we can do here is convert it to CSV like this with the toCSV command. So now we've got a CSV file. It's not in a file, of course, but we could just redirect that to users.csv. And then if I look in that directory in Windows Explorer, I've got a CSV file here now, and I can load that in an Excel spreadsheet. And this is the kind of thing, data transformation that could be quite useful if you want to kind of hand off your data to marketing or sales or, some other department. You'll see here that we've got some nested data, the address object that's under each user object, and that hasn't come through in a very nice way. And we will deal with that. We'll deal with that a little bit later. But for the moment, let's just ignore that. So this talk is called, JavaScripting from the terminal. And so it wouldn't be right if I didn't, start to include a little bit of JavaScript code from the terminal. And I don't know if you can predict what that's going to look like, but let's just go with it. So let's just have another look at users.json. I can spell it right. Let's just, as a real simple test case, let's say I want to pull out the email for each user. Yeah. So in JavaScript, you use the map function to do that. If you've got an array of data, you use the map function to map over it, pull out whatever data fields you want. We can do that using DataKit. So I've got users.json, print that out, pass it to the map command. And this is where I'm doing a bit of JavaScript coding. So I'm giving it an anonymous function here that tells it to extract the email from the record. And so what I end up with now is a JSON array of emails. So what I've done here is the map command, which roughly equates to the JavaScript map function. I've done this on purpose. I've done this so that JavaScript coders can come in here and just sort of know what to expect with some of these commands. Anything in the quotes here is the anonymous JavaScript function, and R is the record, and then that's the parameter to the function. And then the actual function itself can do whatever to transform the data or filter. I'll show you the filter command in a moment. So for example, this is a bit of a wacky use case, but say I want to kind of return an array of an email and the age of that person. So now I've got an array of arrays, and each one has email and the user's age. Pretty simple stuff so far. And of course, you could do this really quickly in JavaScript as well. But there's a whole suite of commands here that you can kind of build up piece by piece and do really complex transformations, as you're going to see in a moment. So what else can we do here? Let's have a look at filtering. So again, I'm just going to print out users.json. I'm going to pass it to the filter command. Again, this is named after the JavaScript filter function, just so you can guess what it's going to do. But we give it a function, and we can have some sort of condition in the function which says, filter out users on some sort of condition. I'm going to say, if anyone older than 29, we're going to get them back. So that gives you a cut down subset of the original JSON, but all the users are going to be 29 or more, which you can check. What we might want to do here is we might just want to check like how many people how many users fall in this demographic. And so we can easily pipe that into the length command and see we started with 20 users and we filtered it down to 11. So you can sort of see here as well, we're starting to build up a pipeline of commands. So the original command just printed the JSON to standard output. And then we took standard input and we filtered that based on a condition. And then we passed it to another command that took in that JSON, that filtered JSON, and told us how long it is. And so we can build these up as long as we want. I could at this point, I could convert that to CSV. I could tack on other transformations, do all sorts of interesting stuff with it. So that's just the simple demonstration. That's the basic demonstration, just to kind of hopefully hook you in and get you interested. I'm gonna kick off with a more complex demonstration in just a moment. First of all, I'll show you where you can get this for yourself. So if you go to my GitHub, Ashley Davis on GitHub, you can find the DataKit page, DataKit repo. So from here you can get to the API docs, which aren't what I'm talking about tonight. I'm not talking about the API. I'm talking about the CLI tonight. So you can go down to there and have a look at the CLI documentation, and you can kind of see the list of commands here that are already supported. So there's quite a few, and I've got a few more that I want to kind of get into this as well in the future. Now, let me just quickly show you how you install DataKit. So you don't have to clone the repo or anything like that, but if you do want to get the example data, clone the repo, all the data is there. But if you want to install it, it's just you have to have node.js installed, and you do an npm install -g for global DataKit. That's it. And then you get all these commands that I'm showing you tonight. You get them installed globally onto your computer for hacking and slashing the data in whatever way you want. So, it's a toolkit for working with data. Like that's really all there is to it. You can use it for data explorations, whether you're trying to figure out what's in your database and how it all fits together. You can use it for really quick data conversions. I'll show you some of that at the end of this presentation tonight. And just any kind of quick jobs where you need to kind of transform your data or do some aggregation or something like that, and you can't be bothered writing like proper code for it. Or maybe you're just in a prototyping phase where you don't really know what you need, and so you just want to experiment and plug your data together with different commands in different ways to see what you want and figure out your data pipeline before you commit to writing the code that you might later roll out to production if that's something you need. So this is also very, very much inspired by JQ. So this is JQ is really good as well. Now the only thing that really tripped me up with JQ is that every time I went back to kind of edit the JQ code, the data transformation code, like I just couldn't remember the syntax. Like it's just a bit bizarre. It's just a bit out there. And I suppose if you were working with JQ every day, you'd get used to that and you'd be totally fine with it. But I was building these occasional data processing pipelines with JQ and thought it was lovely. But then coming back to them, it was just like unreadable code. You'd have to kind of learn it all over again to try and figure out what your code was. And also, I don't think JQ supports YAML or CSV, but I could be wrong about that as well. And so, what I wanted to do was I really wanted to have a toolkit that was based on JavaScript. So I use JavaScript or TypeScript every day, more or less. And I wanted to be able to kind of transfer that knowledge and without having to think about it, and just be able to transfer that into my kind of command line data processing activities. And just so I could feel comfortable and know what I was doing. And it makes me so much more faster and makes it so much more easier for me to get results from my data, just having that level of comfort. Okay, so I think I might move into the more complex example now. So I'm going to be using the same data set, and I'm going to be using some of the other data as well. So I do have to warn you, this is going to get very complicated, and hopefully you won't want to run away screaming, and that you will kind of be able to keep up with it. But it will show you the power of it, and probably this example is like I've kind of made this example up really because like I've never really done anything this complicated, but I do want to show you how far you can go with it. So the aim of this demo is we want to look at our database. Let's say we're doing it again for like the marketing or sales department. and we want to find like our top 5 customers so that we can give them some kind of reward or something like that. So what we've got here is we've got our users.json, sales.json, products.json. Let's have a look at what's in these. So let's have a look at what's in products. So again, I've used ChatGPT to generate all this data. So it's just random data. The product data is not very interesting. It's like product A, product B, product C, all the way down to product S here. And so not particularly exciting, but it'll do for the demo. So each product has an ID that allows us to identify that product. And then if we look at the sales record, we can see that every sale references a user and a product. So essentially, we've got like 2 data sets here, users and products that we can join together through this sales table. So every sale involves a quantity of things sold and the price per unit. And again, we can just do simple stuff like, how many products do we have? We've only got 20 again. We've got 20 of everything. You just have to pretend, we've got maybe hundreds or thousands of these things that we want to analyze or look at. Every data kit command has some really nice help included. And so I'll just zoom out a little bit. Don't worry about reading this, just sort of get the gist of the help, because every command has its own help, and it tells you your description of the command and the syntax of using it, what the inputs are, what the outputs are, and some information. And the best thing here is the examples. So the examples that kind of tell you different ways to use that command. And also at the bottom, there's a link. There's a link that shows you where to find the documentation online for that particular command. So that's really helpful if you're working with it. Now, if you're looking at data and, I've only got 20 here, so I could scroll back and we could see it all, but, let's pretend we've got 1,000 of these things, and like, it's just like a wall of data. It's just too much. So let's cut it back using the take command. We'll cut it back to 3. So you can see here, we've only got 3 items to look at. So this kind of allows you to take a little kind of peek at your data and figure out what's there and get an understanding of what you might want to do with it or how you might want to use it. Again, we can pipeline these commands, so I can put 2 CSV, and I've got like a little CSV file now of our products. DataKit has some built-in formatting commands, which are really useful as well when you don't want to kind of have to kind of output to a CSV file and load it in Excel to see it as a table. Instead, you can use the format table command, which actually prints it out as a nicely formatted table just on your terminal, so it makes it a little bit easier to read. Likewise, there's a format tree command, which actually is nice for showing you the nested structure of your data. And I'll come back to that. I'll come back to this one because I've got a more deeply nested kind of data structure that I can show you in a moment. So we can do the same sort of thing with our sales data. Just take a handful of them, format it so we can kind of see what's there. Makes it a little bit easier to read and understand what we're doing. Now what we want to do is join our data together. So we want to essentially join our sales data with our user data, so we can know how much each user has spent. And then we can sort by that spend amount or that total volume of sales, and we can find out who our best users are. So this is a little bit like doing like an SQL join. I've called it, I don't think there's any analogy in JavaScript to this. So I've just called the command intersect. And what I can do here is I can say, okay, with my users, I want to key them on the ID field. And that's from the users.json file. And then with my sales data, I want to key that on, you can see here, this user ID field. And that's from the sales JSON file. And then I give it one final anonymous JavaScript function here that tells it how to kind of merge the data together. And I'll use the simplest possible thing that I can do, which is just to take every matching user and sale, and then just return a JavaScript object with two sub objects. One is called user, one is called sale. So that gets a massive intersection of the data. I mean, it's not too big here because there's only there's probably only 20 rows in this. But it basically says for every user, it matches them up with their sale. So by itself, this isn't that useful. But what I can do now is I can start to refine this data and merge it, basically. I'll do this. Well, first I've got to organize it by user. So this is where the group command comes in. And I can say group by, what am I grouping by here? User.id. So that's indexing under the user object here in my kind of intermediate data. I'm referencing the ID field here. And that's why I'm passing in a function here to group by that. So that gives me groups where every group has the records that are in that group. So the reason I'm doing this is because theoretically, any user can have multiple sales. And so I need to kind of manipulate the data around that. Now, in this trivial example data set, that's not the case. There's only, like, I couldn't get ChatGPT to be that sophisticated. So I could only get it to create data where there was like one user, one sale. So, but we just have to pretend that any user can have multiple sales. I'm sure you can stretch your imagination to believe that. Okay, this is getting complicated, but I'm gonna compact this data now. I'm going to use the map command. I do have my cheat sheet off screen, so I really am not doing this all off memory or without error off the bat. So I'm not perfect in that regard. Let's once I get sick of typing, I'll start cutting and pasting directly from my cheat sheet. So I'm kind of doing like a nested map here on the data. And fingers crossed that all works. Oh, it's looking pretty good. So now I can see it. I've got my user data, and for each user, I've got an array of the sales that they have been involved in. What's the next step? At this point, I might just format it so we can see what we've got. So I'll tack on a format table at the end here. So we've got all our users, and again, like we've just not got very nice kind of formatting here for our table because there's this nested data. And in fact, this is a good time to show you format tree as well. So we've got this nested data, and I'll show you what's happening here. So on this last entry here, so record number 19 or index 19, user ID 20, Lily Turner, whoever she is, someone that's made up. Nested under here is a address object. So that's the object that's not coming up in our kind of flattened CSV kind of tabular data. And then we've also got sales, which is an array, which has one element. And you can see there the kind of the sales data sitting underneath that. So I really want to clean up the tabular data. I'm not interested in the address in this instance. So I can use the omit command to just take out the address out of every record. That's pretty convenient. I'll format it as a table. And you can see now that the address kind of column is gone. We've just got the sales column to deal with, the sales column that we want to kind of aggregate and work out how many sales that customer has had with us. Okay, this is where it gets super complicated. So I think I'm just going to cut and paste from my little cheat sheet here. And I'll give you some tips in a moment on how to actually do this, really, when you're kind of working in a real kind of data pipeline. So I'm tacking on a command here now that's doing a nested reduce. You kind of can't see it because it's sort of going off one line coming over here. So I'm doing a reduce on the sales data to aggregate it and sum it up. And we can sort of see the result of that if I just do a format table again on the end product here. So you can see that I've pulled in the quantity and the volume, sales volume, so the quantity of items sold and the amount, so that's the price multiplied by the quantity, the amount of that product that they bought with us. We've still got the sales column, so I didn't remove the sales column. I just aggregated the data and added in some new columns into my data here. So I still want to get rid of that, but then again, I can do that again using the omit command. So I'm omitting the sales column here, and we should see that that's gone. And so we've got a nicely aggregated data structure here. It's all over the place though, it's not sorted yet. So you might have noticed we've got 54 here, and then it goes up and then it goes down. So we don't quite know who our best customers are yet, but there is a command called order by that will do that. And you just tell it which column to order by, which field in the JSON array of data to order by. And it was volume, wasn't it? Yeah. So I'm going to order by volume. Format that again. Whoop, what did I do? Bit of a syntax error there. I have tried to put some nice kind of errors in here that kind of tells you like where the problem is occurring. So just my inspiration for this is Rust. I was doing a bit of Rust programming recently, and it had just really nice error messages. So I was trying to do something a little bit similar to that. But what I'm missing here is the record. There we go. Oh, so it's around the wrong way though. We're starting off with small sales volumes and we're going up. So what I have to do just to finalize this is I have to use the basically give it a sort direction, which is to say that I want it to be descending. And now we've got it. We're almost there. We could read off this list the top 5 customers, but we can see that the volume is going down. So the higher spending customers are at the top of the list now, which is good. And the last thing I can do to get the top 5 is just to do like take 5. And then we should be left with 5 customers, the best ones, and we want to send them some sort of custom voucher code to reward them. I don't know how all that sales stuff works, but I'm sure you can imagine why that might be useful. And of course, we can just we can write that out to CSV. Once we write it to CSV, we also want to write it to a file. So let's call it user_sales.csv. And if I go back to Windows Explorer, I can see that, and I can open that in Excel. And not much here really, but it's something that you can hand over. This is not something you've taken from your database, done some work on, and you can kind of hand it over to someone and hopefully have it be easy for them to work with now. So I'm almost done. There's just a couple more things I want to show you. I guess I'll give you some debugging tips first, and then I'll show you a couple of data conversions. So one is to always understand your inputs, right? So that's why I'm always kind of like, look at your data. Whatever it is, look at your data, understand what's there, what you're working with before you try and do anything with it. And then the first useful step is to always use length, the length command, because not only does that tell you how many you've got, but it also tells you that you're working with valid JSON data. There's not some corruption in there or some syntax error in the JSON that makes it unusable. And that's always good to know. And then, look at your, you can actually work piece by piece. Now, I know, I did this massive long thing. I did this massive long command here, and that's a bit hard to follow and a bit hard to put together. But it doesn't have to be like that. You can do it piece by piece, right? So if you want to just do this one thing, just take this one command, just run that one command by itself, and you can actually save like intermediate results. So I'm saving this to temp1.json. We can have a look at that. So I've got like a temporary output here. And so instead of doing, let me recall that big command. Where is it? Yeah. So instead of doing this massive command at once, you can kind of break it down into parts. So I'll do my grouping next. So I'll take that temp.json, so the temporary intermediate file that I've checked, made sure was okay. I've checked that everything kind of worked out okay in there. And I can pipe that into the rest of the command. And then I can save that as temp2.json or whatever you want. So I'm working through it piece by piece, and I'm checking my outputs and I'm checking my inputs each time. So it makes it a lot easier to work through the whole process without errors, and also just not getting overwhelmed by this like massive command line. What else do we want to look at? Oh, another thing that might be useful as well is that, instead of just typing it in at the command line, write it up in a text editor first. You can write each, separate it out over multiple lines. This works really well. This works much better actually on Linux and Mac. Like here's what my cheat sheet looks like. So I've got like this massive command here, chopped up over multiple lines. I'm not sure that this works on Windows, but I know this works on Linux and probably on Mac OS as well. You can just type this multi-line command in, and you can kind of see that each command here is on its own separate line. So it's much easier to understand what it's doing, much easier to put together. All right. Now, I've got some cool data to show you as well. Some of my favorite data is this Star Wars data. I can't even remember where I got this from. I used this in a demo for BrizJS, I think a couple of years ago. I got it from somewhere online, and I've just been sort of carrying it around with me in my back pocket because I love it. You've got, all the Star Wars characters, maybe not all of them, but, a lot of them anyway, planets, it's just fun data to work with and to play with. I'm just going to show you a couple of simple data conversions just to show you how easy it can be. So let's say we want to go from JSON to CSV. I mean, you've already seen that in action anyway, so it's not that exciting, but it's just using the toCSV command. And then obviously you can kind of save that as a CSV file and you converted it. If you want to go from CSV file back to JSON, then you will use the from CSV command, and that brings it back to JSON. So you could save that as a JSON file. You can also go to YAML, we support YAML. So we're going from JSON to YAML here, and we could save that as a YAML file. And then we could bring the YAML file back using from YAML. So bringing it back into JSON, and so then we can pipeline it into all these other commands that DataKit supports. Anything else? Yes, here's a cool one. So one thing that's really cool is you can use this directly with your REST APIs as well. So I'm just using as an example the JSON placeholder to do's REST API, and I'm going to pull it down here using curl, and S means silent, I think, so that it doesn't kind of, like, you just want to get back the JSON. If you get back any of the other progress indicators or any other output, it kind of messes up DataKit. So you just need the JSON. And when I run this curl command, it's pulling down this list of to-dos from this REST API. Hopefully. Yep. There we go. So we've got a bunch of to-dos here, and you can just pipe it directly into DataKit. So I'm going to, how many is there? There's 200. I'm going to pull out, I can do a map, and I can pull out the user ID. So let's do that. So map. Out of my record, I'm going to pull the user ID. I can spell it. So I've got a list of user IDs. You can see some users have got a bunch of to-dos against their name. There's a distinct command that just gets you distinct. So this is the users that are using the system at the moment. Assuming it was a real system, which it's not. It's just obviously it's just placeholder fake data. And if you had a lot of them, you could pipe that into the length command, and you could see how many distinct users you've got, adding to-dos to the list or something like that. What else have we got here? I'll show you one more thing, and that is so almost like to go hand in hand with DataKit, I made MongoKit. So MongoKit is a command line application where you kind of set your connection string to your database. You can set it from the command line, or you can set it in an environment variable. And then you can use commands to pull down all your data really easily. So for example, MongoKit, zoom in a bit, hopefully everyone can see this. MongoKit get a collection, and then you tell it the collection name, and the database you're connected to, it'll pull down that named collection as JSON, which you can store as a JSON file locally, and then you use DataKit to process that. Or you can just tack DataKit commands on the end of this, pipe the results of this into DataKit commands directly, and to work directly with the data that's coming out of your database. So you can find the DataKit code repo on my GitHub page. That's Ashley Davis on GitHub. The repo is DataKit. You can install it through npm, and it's a simple, cool toolkit for reading and writing data and doing transformations and aggregations and all sorts of cool stuff like that. I just want to quickly plug my book before I end, and we have some questions. So where is it? I'm working on a book called Rapid Full Stack Development. It's about being a more effective and efficient developer across the stack. I'm over halfway through writing it now. It's been taking a while because I'm also, it's a whole other story, but I'm writing another book as well. But this one is like over halfway through now, hoping to finish it maybe mid next year at this rate. But you can get on board early for a discount and get chapters as I've written them, and you can give feedback as the book is being written. So really looking for support for this book. So if you like the idea of that, please jump on and get it for a discount. And I think I'm done.
Amazing, sir. Thank you very much for taking us through all that.
I'm a little bit ahead of schedule, but it depends on the questions, I guess.
No, you're all good. You're all good. We've got a whole bunch of different questions we can run through as well, and just, I guess, some support and some love from the audience as well. So yeah, we're absolutely keen. And look, I love it. I often run into this like, oh, I've got a file. The hell do I do now? So, this is just so much easier. So absolutely going to install this today. So that's going to help me out a lot as well. So yeah, it seems so obvious. I think like I saw one of the comments on this as well. It seems so obvious, but it wasn't there, and you did it. And like I honestly, it feels like it
I
should
feel
have
the same
always
way.
existed.
I feel like I could have been using this for years, and it would have been really useful. But like every time, like I said, every time I need to do it, I just write custom code without thinking about it. And then somehow this time around, I had the epiphany that like, oh, I need to use JQ, but JQ isn't exactly what I need. Oh,
Yep.
why don't we just use JavaScript?
Yeah. Well, I'm always throwing this data into an object map in the REPL or something like that, and then just trying to play with it that way. But this is just nice and native. Sometimes it's just going to be a lot quicker to just do that one thing. So,
and, before someone asks the question as well, you can actually load your code from a file as well. You don't actually have to type your code in the command line. It will actually load a file and use eval to run that. So
yeah.
I think that can make it a little bit easier to work with. But I don't suggest that anyone uses this for production coding or anything like that. It's for quick and dirty stuff, exploratory stuff, and prototyping. It's not, you shouldn't be writing any real kind of products this way. It's just what you need to do to get the job done sometimes, right?
Just you wait, someone's going to write an entire server-side app with this thing. So, and you're going to be like, no, look, that is technology. It is there to be used in the most creative of ways as well. So, no, that's wonderful, mate. I'll start throwing through a couple of the questions already. No particular order, or maybe it is a particular order. It's probably based upon the way they came in, the time order. So I think right off the top, we had Jordan coming in saying, nice. Have you ever been able to use the rootkit on a live database like MongoDB to do any CRUD operations? So you're essentially saying straight into live DBs or live Mongo databases.
It can be very error prone to do that kind of thing. Obviously, you want to be very careful with that. But MongoKit has like getter and setter operations. So you can actually set documents, update fields in documents. You can do all the CRUD stuff basically using MongoKit. And I wouldn't want to see anyone kind of using that on a live production database, because obviously it's really easy to make a mistake.
Yep.
But it was really useful for me when I was kind of like creating replicas of my company's database for testing and stuff like that. So if you've got a test database or a local database that you want to populate really quickly, MongoKit can do it really easily. And of course, you can update your production databases with it, but I'm sure anyone that uses Mongo, I love MongoDB, but I'm sure anyone who uses it knows that it's really easy to shoot yourself in the foot because you could just easily delete something that you didn't want to delete. So there's that downside. Be very careful.
Absolutely. Don't let anyone run get near a non-read-only live production database. So yeah, no, that's definitely a disclaimer and a half. We don't want anyone to go and be live editing these things. But hey, local hacking on your own data sets and working on that stuff, and just using the DB as like a better scratch space, honestly, sounds like a really fantastic feature of this. So yeah, no, I can definitely see the usefulness of that. Some more love, I think, just in the next few comments here. Nice, seems like a JQ plus JSON path combination with more. So there's a lot of additional love in here as well. There's one question here. Other than interactive querying, have you utilized this well to parse and capture different stages of a data query to local files each step? So I replied to that one interactively while it was sort of, because you did actually go and show this. You sort of said you did step through this. You kind of went and piped it, then each one to a new file, so you can build up this query, which I think is part of what Anonymous here is kind of trying to ask. But I guess
you definitely need to do that while you're trying to figure out what you're trying to do. Like another way I use this, which was really useful in my contracting work, I got asked to do kind of like a stock take of what we had in the cloud, and so I was able to kind of get some CLI commands for the cloud provider to spit me out like to do a search of all the resources, like all the VMs and all the databases and storage volumes and all stuff like that. And there was like hundreds of thousands of them, because a lot of them are just defaults, right? Like they come with the cloud vendor. And then you spit all that out to JSON files. And then I was using DataKit to work through it, filter out all the kind of default rubbish that I didn't care about. And I was actually trying to find the resources that the company did care about, and create like some spreadsheets for these people that kind of showed how, like, what they had in there. But you can also, this kind of stuff is also really useful for cloud billing. If you ever kind of get a bill and you want to work that out, and you've got a massive like CSV file that you've downloaded from your cloud vendor, and you want to kind of filter that by the most expensive stuff, or sort it by the most expensive stuff to find out really where you're spending the money. It can be really useful for doing that kind of stuff as well. So just anything really that involves data. But there are a couple of the things that I've used it for recently.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think part of my question here was, I guess in response to this question, then was I'm assuming maybe you mean like through library flags as well. So like, is there an option in the I guess the binaries that you're piping to just pick up like a dash with output, so that it always outputs like every single time without having to pipe? Or is that paradigm shift that not sort of part of the intent of the library?
I'm not really understanding what you're meaning. Can you explain?
Yeah, so I was asking a question through this question. So like essentially, is there any option on any of the utilities that will force them to always write to disk, I think, through each of their options?
Yeah. So well, let me give you an example. Just share screen again.
Because I think that addresses the point of the question there as well, which was, is there a way to get it to always write for each stage of this query? So I think rather than
it won't do it automatically. It won't do it automatically. Okay. But so the default is that it'll read JSON from standard input, and then whatever the command does, it'll write the output as JSON to standard output. But you can completely control that. So we've been using, so just as an example, we've been using the length command like this. We've been piping to it. Okay, I'm sorry, I've got to convert that from CSV before I do that, because it only handles. This is why we have to convert, because it only handles JSON. So we've been using the length command that way, but we can also tell it where to read the data, right? So if you give it a parameter, that parameter is going to be the file to load it from, and then the length command isn't a great one for this one. What's a good example for this? Have a look at the JSON file. Let's do a filter based on height, and we'll save that to a file. So there's two ways to do that. I could do it, just by printing the whole thing to standard input, and then doing my filter on that and saying height. Let's say, I don't know, it's greater than 120. So by default, that comes to standard output. But we can also say you always put the input file first, but if you want to read from standard input, use a dash. So that just preserves the behavior. We can also say, output.json, whatever you want that to be. And then that will be the filtered output. So every command can read and write from files. And if you wanted to, you could just get rid of this piping altogether. And instead of this hyphen here, lost it, sorry. So again, instead of this hyphen over here, I can give it the characters.json. And that does the same thing, except it's reading from the first file and it's writing to the second file. And this just natively understands, based on the extension, what you want to do as well. So that'll just write out the CSV file just by changing the extension. Same for a YAML file as well. So we've got a YAML output file here now as well. So it supports the different file formats really seamlessly.
Very nice.
But there's no automatic kind of writing of queries or anything like that. It's just not something I even considered myself.
Yep. No, I think that's about as automatic as it would need to be. That makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, I think with a poorly conceived query, you'd probably end up writing enough data to disk that you'd probably fill up a hard drive. But I think one of the other questions here was around if you have a well-defined set of related models in a database, would you be able to use these tools to create local JSON versions of the data set with the relations intact? I presume so.
Well, these tools, DataKit by itself only works with JSON. And then it's, it's got a couple of commands for dealing with CSV and YAML files. And when you're importing or outputting a file, it can automatically figure out, from the extension, what kind of data you're importing. But under the hood, it's really all just JSON files. And it actually makes it really easy to extend. So it's really easy to add a new command because it's like a framework, and you just plug a bit of logic in the middle that kind of deals with JSON data. And your little bit of logic for your command doesn't really care about, what data format it is. It just kind of deals with parsed JSON data. Yeah. And then so that's what it gets as input, and what it gets as output. And it doesn't care whether it comes from standard input, where it goes to. It just knows that it's coming from somewhere and going to somewhere. So I refactored it early on to be this really kind of easy to extend framework that made it really easy to keep adding new commands to it. But in terms of like integration with databases and understanding the interactions between, or the relationships between tables in databases, like it doesn't know anything like that. Like it doesn't talk to a database. It can't infer any relationships by itself. You can use that intersect command to tell it, what fields to find the relationships. So you can do something that's a bit like an SQL join. You have to provide a lot of that logic yourself in what happens after the join, which I don't think you have to do with SQL. So it's only very, very loosely like an SQL join, and it doesn't talk to any databases natively. But that other thing that I created was MongoKit. So that was just a separate thing that you can install that allows you to pull JSON data from MongoDB. You could do the same kind of thing with SQL. In fact, I'd love it if someone went out and made SQL kit that could, pull data in like down to your computer as JSON files from SQL. And then we could use those SQL files with DataKit. So it'd all work nicely together. But DataKit by itself, it doesn't know or care about databases.
Yeah, I think the implied solution to the question here is about, parsing a particular schema that's defined in JSON and then having it intersect automatically on those different related keys. But that's kind of like, that's something for them to implement.
Yeah. It could be doable. I never really got much of a chance to use JSON schema. I've read about it and used it just a handful of times. It's really cool, but it's JSON itself. So you could run the schema through DataKit itself and do something like that. But in terms of understanding how data fits together, I don't really think that's the purpose of DataKit. It's pretty low level. It doesn't really make any assumptions about how your data works or what it does. It was difficult. It was actually difficult to keep it that sort of general because, of course, I've got all these specific ways I want to use it. And the fact that I made it extensible by typing JavaScript at the command line means you can literally do anything with it. You can apply any kind of your own logic or filters or connections or conditions or whatever in there and just customize it however you want on the command line when you're trying to figure out what you're trying to do.
Exactly. Yeah, that's good. I guess the next question, or what's the order here? Here we go. Next one here is I see formatters. I guess the display formatting. Could we contribute formatter plugins? There's some folks who want to be able to create other outputs, I guess, table and tree.
I jump into the repo and open an issue saying what you want to do. There's no, it doesn't really support plugins, so I don't know how we do that. It's pretty easy to add a command, and if your command kind of fits the core kind of thing, then I'd be happy to accept a pull request, and I'd love to get other people making commands, but once I start getting specific to people's requirements, I'm probably not going to accept them.
Yeah,
if we could kind of discuss it in GitHub issues, maybe we can figure out a way between us to make this pluggable so people can add stuff to it.
Absolutely, sounds good. There's another one here by Luke Warren. Great tool, Ash. Thinking a probe function might be helpful. Functional programming style lenses could also be very interesting and useful. Open to contributors? Question mark.
Yeah, so yes, I have considered that, and I've actually asked for Luke's opinion before on how you use lenses and to pull apart trees and tree data structures and put them back together. And I do have this section in my to-do list for DataKit that's how do I do that? How do I do that in DataKit from the command line? So Luke, I'll probably be picking your brains again at some point in the future on how to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, nice. Well, you said open to contributors? Question mark. So that's a yes. Get in there, Luke. Sounds good. I think we've got the next question here, which is in flattened tabular data when we have serialized objects that can't be presented. Okay, so in your example where you've got object, could we specify a sub-processing function like to get it to stringify?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I did have a think about how that would work, but I do like. So I have. Some of you may know that I have a data processing library in JavaScript and TypeScript called DataForge, and it allows you to kind of like format a big data set and plug in formatters for particular fields. Like this is a function that formats it, or this is like a string that kind of sets the time or the date format, stuff like that. Yeah, that's definitely on the cards for DataKit. I haven't thought at all about how that would work from the command line, how that would fit. But if someone out there is interested to have a play with that and have a go at it, I'd love to see what they come up with.
Yeah, it sounds like the solution there is still to just do an intermediary step of flattening those things into a single piece. And
right. You can just map it, right, and just pull out the field you want and transform it. So like I went through this process as well. There were all these specific things that I wanted to do with DataKit, and I was like, oh no, you can do that with map. Oh, you can do that with map. There's also a bigger command called transform. So when your data is an array, so map only works if the data is actually array. So does filter and reduce. There's a reduce command in there as well. So and length as well. So there's a bunch of commands that only actually work if the input is actually an array. But your input might be like an object, or even just some primitive value. And there is a generic transform command which can transform the data no matter what it is, whether it's an array or not. So that's kind of like the I guess the worst case scenario. Like I tend to use it just with arrays of data, but if you've got something else, you can use this transform command on it, and input is the entire data set, and output is whatever you want. So it's at that level, it's not just working with arrays of data or like typical database data. It could be something else.
Yeah, and I think that fits the bill nicely. Last but not least, this question says, how does this work? Which of these are binaries, and what is passing indexes and data to the parameters?
Do I have time to show how one of the commands works?
Yeah, you could quickly show us some of the ins and outs.
There's a lot under the hood, but like I said, I made this framework that allows the command to only care about incoming data and outgoing data. So let me just share screen again, and I'll just and I invite people to kind of jump in the code and have a look, because like it's surprisingly simple. There's a lot of stuff under the hood that says, like, am I getting it from standard input, or am I getting it to a file? What format is the file? Shall I convert it? There's a lot of complicated stuff under the hood. Let me just find my page here. So this is on GitHub. We'll just drill down and we'll have a look. So these are all just JavaScript, right? There's no compiled binaries here at all. It's all just JavaScript installed through NPM and running on node.js. And or if you're interested in how to make something be installed to look like it's a command or a binary on the system, have a look in the package.json. So here basically is this bin subsection of the package.json. This tells you all the commands and what script file they relate to. So whenever you run the format table command, it's going to run this script command here. And if we look at that, if you drill down under the CLI folder here and we find that, actually I'll do map, because map's a nice one that everyone knows, hopefully, the map function. So look at map. And this is just a JavaScript file with no extension. And there's like, I don't know, do you call that like a hash bang or something? It tells it to run it under node. So that's how it knows to run it under node. And then it basically just imports the command and the documentation for it. And I made a helper function. So this is kind of like part of the command line framework, as it were, that there's a run function that basically it passes the command to and the documentation for it. And it sort of takes care of running it, providing it with data, doing something with the output, and then printing out the documentation when you type in like help on the command line. The real guts of it are down in the map.js file. This is all written in TypeScript as well, but because this is what is run on when it's installed on your computer, it's already been compiled to JavaScript. But I'll show you what it looks like before it's compiled to JavaScript in TypeScript. And that's all the commands are under the source directory here. We look under CLI, we should see map. Oh no, sorry. I just went back to where I was. Here I am. So this is it in its entirety. Most of the time I spent working on this was the documentation. This part here is the documentation for this command. and it's like a JavaScript object that gets like formatted. And I generate, I'm actually quite proud of how I generate the documentation for this. So this thing gets printed out on the terminal when you type help. And also I have a like a pre-publication script that runs that converts this to Markdown that gets stored in the repo so that you can browse the help file there as well. But that's all. This is the guts of it, right? Not much to it really. What it's doing here is it's accepting a bunch of arguments, an array of strings. So that's what you typed in at the command line. Because we're loading in a user-defined anonymous function for the map function, it kind of does that first using a help method. Load user function. So that basically takes the argument, or it loads a file if you've specified to bring in your code from a file, and it evals it. Well, it doesn't eval it till down here actually. So it just kind of loads it in the step. So you've got a function that you can call. Actually, you have to just have a look in there. I can't even remember how it works. It's been a few months since I actually was in the guts of it. The next thing it does here anyway is it calls input data. So input data will by default load it in from standard input, or if you've specified a file name in the arguments, it'll if it's a JSON file, it'll load it in and parse it from JSON. If it's CSV or YAML, it'll load it in and parse it from that format. There's a little bit of error checking here, and then it just runs the JavaScript map function. So this is like the guts of that map function. And for every record in the data, it's calling this helper function invoke user function. So that's what's, I think, kind of like doing the eval under the hood, and basically doing a little bit of nice kind of error handling and showing you if there's an error in your code, where that error was. And then at the end of it, it's calling this output data helper function. And so, depending on what you put in your arguments, it's going to either output it directly to the terminal standard output, or it's going to write it to a file if you've specified a file in whatever format that's going to be in. And we're just passing in the transform data to write out. So each command is like really simple to understand, but under the hood, under some of these functions, it gets a little bit complicated. Besides that, though, through various iterations, I simplified it and just to kind of optimize for adding new commands.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, look, it's very straightforward. So I think, yeah, folks should definitely look into, under the hood of all this magic, and just see where where it works for your operations.
So anyone that's interested in contributing, find the repo, and the first step is to run the tests. There's a whole suite of automated tests around this that make sure it works. They take a while to run, some of them, but it's worthwhile just to see what happens.
Very nice. Well, good, my friend. No, I think that was very thorough. And of course, everyone, if you do have additional questions, we're still here for a little while. Feel free to leave them in there. I don't mind pulling backup speakers to answer more questions if they're around. They haven't disconnected. Yeah, no, absolutely. That would be fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time out, showing everyone a cool tool, and a little bit about how it came to be as well. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.